Welcome to the Shaw Consulting Podcast. In this episode, we're focusing on how social housing providers can maximise their investment in IT and make better use of the systems they've already bought. With tight budgets, rising demand and increasing regulatory scrutiny, are social housing providers getting the value they should from their technology spend? I'm Stuart, and here to answer that question is Chris Shaw, Shaw Consulting MD. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Stuart.
Okay, so let's jump straight into it. So many social housing providers invest heavily in new systems, but still rely on manual workarounds. Why does this gap between system capability and day-to-day use still persist?
It usually comes down to three things we find. And, first, organizations often buy systems based on what they hope they'll achieve, but they don't always invest the same time in redesigning their processes to match it. So, technology gets bolted onto old ways of working, and naturally, people default to spreadsheets or manual steps because that's what they know. Second, implementations are frequently rushed and focus on getting it live rather than getting it right. Core configuration gets skipped, integrations aren't finished, and key modules never get turned on, meaning the system never reaches its full potential. And finally, people just aren't supported enough through the change. So without proper training, champions, and ongoing ownership, users create their own workarounds, and over time, those workarounds become the norm and the system never matures. I think the key point here is there's always a lot of effort going into the implementation of these systems. But once they go live, those teams get disbanded and there's not enough time for embedding change and ensuring compliance.
Okay, that's a really interesting final point. The whole thing sounds a bit like me when I buy a new gadget and read the first page of the instruction manual and then put that on the shelf to gather dust and just have a go myself.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're all guilty of that, aren't we, Chris? So from your experience, what are the most common reasons organizations fail to fully adopt or optimize the systems they've already bought?
I'd like to highlight four recurring issues and themes we see. So one, there's no clear owner. Systems are often owned by IT by default, but optimization is a business-led activity. So without a clear sponsor who is accountable for outcomes, improvements, simply don't happen. That lack of data readiness, if data quality is poor, staff lose trust in the system quickly. And once that confidence drops, usage drops, and it becomes that vicious circle. And three, underestimating the effort to embed behavioral change. People need time, and they need support, and they need reinforcement. So adoption doesn't just happen because the system is available. It needs to be, properly embedded. And four, buying additional modules instead of fixing the basics. Organizations assume new features will magically improve things. But if we don't have the right foundations, processes, configuration, data, adding more only makes the situation worse.
That's interesting, that final point. It's a bit like the new shiny thing comes along, let's take a look at that, rather than actually looking at what we've got and understanding and realizing that it would do the job anyway.
Yeah.
So how important is process design and user behavior compared to the technology itself when it comes to actually realizing the value of your IT investment?
I think it's absolutely critical, Stuart. In fact, it's the biggest determinant of success. Technology is only ever about 20 to 30% of the challenge. The rest is the operating model around it, the processes people follow, the decisions the systems are designed to support, the handoffs between, the different teams, and, the skills and confidence of the users. Good systems force clarity. You need to know who does what, when, how, and why. And if that thinking hasn't been done, the system ends up reflecting ambiguity instead of efficiency. So, yes, tech matters, but process discipline and behavioral change matter far more.
So it's the human element. I think we've talked about this in many of our podcasts, haven't we, Chris?
We have.
The importance of that, understanding the system, being on top of the way the process works, and that continual review and assessment. So picking up on that point, what role should leaders and governance play in ensuring systems are configured, used, and continuously improved in line with what an organization wants to achieve?
To me, leadership sets the tone. So if leaders treat systems as just an IT thing, the organization is going to follow suit. But when leaders, view systems as strategic assets, essential for compliance, improved customer experience, and better productivity, that's when value is really realized. So governance needs to make sure there's a clear owner for every system, prioritize improvements based on organizational goals, not the loudest voices, track adoption and benefits, not just project milestones, ensure funding is available for continuous improvement, not just that one-off implementation that we mentioned. The most successful organizations I've seen treat their core systems the way they treat their housing assets, something that needs planned maintenance, ongoing investment, and that structured oversight.
What a great point that. I think that's a really good takeaway from this podcast, that, Chris. So let's look at the risks now. So what risks do housing providers face when they continue to layer new technology on top of underused or poorly configured systems?
You end up with complexity, duplication, and spiraling cost. And instead of just simplifying things, every new system adds another set of processes, another login, another reporting view, another pool of data. And that fragments the customer journey and it creates more manual work, not less. So there's also a big compliance risk. If your core system isn't configured properly, the data you're reporting to the regulator may be unreliable and you may not even realize it. And commercially, it locks you into spending more and more just to stand still. You're not getting value from the innovation if the fundamentals aren't working for you.
That compliance risk, Chris, must be a real red light for anyone listening to this and a
Mhm.
wake up. Actually, if you're going to take anything away from this podcast today, that's something you really need to consider. So let's just move on to the final question. For organizations looking to reset and extract more value from their existing IT system, tell our listeners what a sensible and practical starting point looks like.
I think start with that simple question. What do we need our systems to actually achieve? That clarity is often missing. From there, I'd recommend a structured three-step approach. Assess your current state, what's configured well, what's being used, where are the pain points, what data can or can't you trust. And once you know that, then start to create a prioritized improvement plan that focuses on high value, low complexity actions first. Sometimes small configuration changes or process tweaks can deliver huge benefits. Then 3, start to build system ownership and capability. Organizations often skip this step. You need product owners, you need super users, you need data stewards, people who are accountable for the system performing well every day. It's not about starting again. It's about getting the most out of what you've already got before spending more.
I think that probably last line you've said there, Chris, is probably a relief. Considering the investment some people will have made, and there's probably thinking, do we have to get our blank piece of paper out again? So on that point, I think let's finish. Let's wrap this up. Excellent, Chris. Thanks very much for your input on that.
Thanks, Stuart.
So as always, organisations wanting support can contact Chris via LinkedIn or the Shaw Consulting website. So thanks for listening and watch out for more Shaw podcasts coming soon. Thank you.